This is the Sony A1, Sony's new flagship mirrorless camera that boasts a whopping 50 megapixel sensor and can shoot at a burst rate of 30 frames per second. However, it also packs a whopping $6,500 US price tag. So the question remains, is it really worth it? The answer for many is probably not. Let me explain. Yo, what's up squad? Welcome on into the channel. My name is Kyle Meshna. I am a landscape photographer and YouTuber based here in San Francisco, California. If this is your first time here, welcome. If it's your second or third time seeing my face on your YouTube screen, it is a sign from the YouTube overlords that you should probably hit subscribe. So in this video, after about a terabyte of photo and video footage taken on the Sony A1, really putting it through its paces, I wanted to give you 3 scenarios in which you probably should not be buying this camera. Scenario 1 in which you should not be buying the Sony A1 is if you do not have top-notch lenses. Using lower end glass is going to not take advantage of the Sony A1's full capabilities. It's meant to be paired with native glass or high-end glass, such as the Sony G Master lineup. If you do not already have high-end lenses, you're probably going to get better image quality by investing in some high-end glass instead. If you're still building up your lens kit, I would definitely recommend looking at something like the A7 III or even the A7R III, both of which are massively discounted. Even though they are a few years old, they are still incredible cameras. Scenario 2 in which you should not be buying the Sony A1 is if you do not need the continuous shooting or super fast autofocus capabilities. The speed of the Sony A1 can be broken down into 2 main categories: shutter speed and autofocus performance. In order to achieve the super high burst rates that are capable on the Sony A1, you'll need to use the electronic shutter. This electronic shutter has a couple of key benefits to it. First and foremost, the electronic shutter is essentially just grabbing the image straight off the shutter and there's no moving pieces in there. This can be helpful for a few reasons. First, if you're in a long lens situation, the mechanical shutter can sometimes shake your image. So especially if you're doing a long exposure, that click of the shutter can actually shake your exposure and cause a blurry image. Not only that, but because there is no mechanical clicking, the electronic shutter isn't actually counting against your shutter count in the same way that a mechanical shutter would. This helps with the longevity of the camera itself, and it also helps with the resale value. When you're buying a $6,500 camera, that's something you should be happy about. The electronic shutter also allows for no blackout shooting, which means you're always seeing what you're shooting, and the focus box is just gonna pulsate to let you know that you're actually taking a photo. It cannot be understated how epic this is the first time you use it. It's gonna be hard to go back to using a blackout shutter. Not only that, but you also unlock a shutter speed of up to 1/32,000th of a second, which is just absurd. And honestly, in all of these things, these are all pretty much nice to haves. In the world of adventure and lifestyle and landscape photos in which I operate, there are a few scenarios in which I will turn on the high burst rate, but for the most part, I do not think most folks will be needing this level of speed unless you're shooting events that really justify spending $6,500 on a camera because they're paying you enough for you to afford a $6,500 camera. And if that's you, why are you watching this YouTube video? You already know that this camera is for you. The second speed factor comes down to autofocus. The autofocus on the Sony A1 is nothing short of incredible. The camera can basically autofocus and take photos in the dark. The eye autofocus is like having a magnet attached to your eyeball, and the tracking functionality is like something out of a sci-fi movie, which, speaking of, the autofocus in video mode is equally as impressive, but more on that in just a moment. But that said, something like the A7R IV is no slouch in the autofocus department either. The eye autofocus works fantastic, and unless you're shooting alongside the Sony A1, you're really not gonna know what it is that you're missing. The only issue is that once you shoot with the Sony A1, you do know that there is more that there is to offer, and really the Sony A1 is probably gonna be faster than you are. And while the Sony A1 is certainly best in class when it comes to high-speed shooting, the A7R IV can still shoot 10 frames per second. Compare that to something like the 1DX Mark II, which for a long time has been considered the grandfather, the master of all sports photography. That can only take 14 frames per second, and that has something like a 20 megapixel sensor compared to the 61 megapixel sensor of the Sony A7R IV. So if you are a more photo forward shooter, do you really need these high speed capabilities of the Sony A1, or do you just want a super quality camera with high dynamic range, a large sensor, and really strong autofocus? If that's the case, you can probably stick with the A7R IV for less than half the price. Now, before we get to the third scenario in which I think you should not be purchasing this camera, I first wanted to thank our sponsor for today's video, Manscaped. Manscaped has just launched the new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. Manscaped's lawnmower has been around for a while now, but the new 4.0 is an absolute work of art. You can think about it as the Sony A1 for ball trimmers. The new charging system uses electromagnetic induction, which is basically fancy science speak for it charges super fast and there's no annoying plug and no overcharging for better battery performance. The dock cradles your lawnmower just like your special someone will want to cradle your, after you're done using it. As I've started to travel more, one of my favorite new features is the new travel lock. You just have to tap the on button 3 times and you'll engage the travel lock feature. So you never have to worry about buzzing in your suitcase or draining your battery. You've also got 4 additional trimmer guards of 4 different lengths, so you can basically create whatever work of art masterpiece you want down there. The build quality is exceptional. It's much quieter than previous models without cutting the things that you don't want cut. So to get 20% off and free international shipping, use the promo code Meshna20 at checkout at manscaped.com. Your balls will thank you. So getting to the third scenario in which I do not think you should be purchasing this camera is if you are not a true hybrid shooter. A key selling point of the Sony A1 is it is a true hybrid shooting camera. It's got the best video specs of the A7S III, the resolution comparable to the Sony A7R IV, and then the speed of the Sony A9 II. Now the Sony A1 can shoot in 8K. I personally don't see much of a need to shoot in anything close to 8K for 99% of scenarios, but maybe you're into VFX or you just want to say screw it and don't want to ever have to worry about framing a shot and you just want to crop everything in post. If that's your prerogative, you go for it. 8K is shooting aside, it also does shoot 4K 10-bit 422 in up to 120 frames per second. This thing is literally about as impressive as most cinema cameras, all in this tiny, tiny body. Not to mention all of the crazy photo specs that we already talked about. All of these things combine to make it one heck of a hybrid camera. But the question is, are you truly a hybrid shooter? Are you getting paid for professional photo work and professional video work? Or are you leaning one way or the other? I already mentioned if you lean more photo heavy and you want to have the ability to shoot decent 4K, then maybe the A7R IV is for you. Or on the flip side, if you're a more video focused shooter, there's really no reason that you need anything more than the Sony A7S III. I've already done many videos walking through what I think of the Sony A7S III, why I think it's a more than ample photo camera for most people. But if the answer is yes, and you really are a 50-50 hybrid photo and video shooter, you want to produce really high quality photo and video all in one nice small package, then yeah, this camera slaps. It slaps harder than a level 99 Jigglypuff. That type of thing is the key selling point that got me to purchase it, and I love having everything in one nice, super powerful, but very small package. All of those things is what you want and truly need out of a professional camera such as this one. But if that isn't you, and you don't need all of these things, you don't need that high burst rate, you don't need the hybrid shooting, you don't have an extensive G Master lens lineup, then probably save yourself $3,000. And if I did save you $3,000, perhaps say thank you by playing thumb war with the like button. There's a couple of videos popping up here. I would love it if you watch some of those ones, and I'll see you in the next one.